Amara was the kind of young woman everyone in Kisola, Nigeria, spoke warmly about. She had a heart that seemed to give without limit. If a neighbor needed food, she shared what little she had. If a friend was in trouble, she was the first to show up. Her smile carried a softness that made people trust her, and her loyalty ran so deep that those closest to her never doubted her. Among all her friendships, none was as important as the one she shared with Lindiwe. They had grown up side by side, walking to school together, laughing under the mango trees, and sharing secrets late into the night. To Amara, Lindiwe was more than a friend. She was the sister her parents never gave her. Life began to change when Amara met Taye. He was a young architect, known for his hard work and steady character. He wasn't the loudest man in the room, but his calm confidence drew Amara in. The way he spoke about his dreams, the care he showed for her opinions, and the respect he gave her made her feel cherished in a way she had never experienced before. For the first time, Amara's heart opened fully, and she allowed herself to imagine a future filled with love and stability. What Amara didn't see was the shadow forming close by. Lindiwe, the very friend she trusted with her deepest feelings, began to envy what she saw. While she smiled at Amara and listened to her stories about Taye, inside she wrestled with jealousy. It wasn't enough for her to watch her best friend's happiness. Slowly, a dangerous thought took root. If Amara had found love, maybe it could be hers instead. And quietly, in the secrecy of her own heart, Lindiwe began to plot. At first, nothing seemed wrong. Lindiwe was all smiles whenever Amara spoke about Taye. She would nod with excitement, ask questions, and even call him a good man in front of others. To anyone watching, it looked like she was the most supportive friend in the world. She told Amara things like, "You're lucky, he really loves you," and Amara believed her. Why wouldn't she? This was the friend who knew all her secrets, the one she had trusted since childhood. But behind those warm words, Lindiwe carried a bitterness she kept carefully hidden. Every time she saw the way Taye looked at Amara, every time she watched Amara glow with happiness, her envy grew sharper. Lindiwe's betrayal didn't come in obvious ways. She knew better than to show her jealousy openly. Instead, she began planting small seeds of doubt in Amara's mind, always disguising them as concern. When Taye worked late, Lindiwe would say, "Are you sure he isn't too busy for you?" If Amara mentioned how kind he was, Lindiwe would tilt her head and reply softly, "Yes, but sometimes men who look perfect have secrets." These comments seemed harmless, even caring, but they settled in Amara's heart like tiny thorns. She would brush them off at first, reminding herself that Lindiwe only wanted the best for her. Soon, Lindiwe found ways to spend more time around Taye. She pretended it was for Amara's sake. "I want to help him plan something special for you," she would say, offering to meet him to arrange surprises. Amara thought it was sweet that her best friend cared so much, so she never suspected anything. She even felt grateful, telling herself that Taye and Lindiwe getting along was a blessing. But deep inside, a quiet unease sometimes stirred. Why did Lindiwe always linger when Taye was around? Why did her eyes shine a little too brightly when she laughed at his jokes? Still, Amara silenced those thoughts. She told herself she was being silly, that true friends didn't betray each other. Her trust in Lindiwe was stronger than her own instincts, and so she chose to believe in the friendship she valued so deeply. To doubt Lindiwe felt like doubting her own heart, and so the dangerous game continued. Lindiwe kept smiling, kept pretending to care, while secretly weaving herself closer into Amara's world with Taye. Amara, blind with trust, didn't see the storm quietly building. She thought she had two people in her life who wanted her happiness, but in truth, one of them wanted to take it all away. While Amara trusted her friend with her whole heart, Lindiwe was quietly spinning a story of her own. To outsiders, she played the role of the supportive best friend, but behind closed doors, her words painted a different picture. She began to whisper to people in the community that Taye seemed more interested in her than in Amara. She said it casually, almost as if it were a joke, but she repeated it enough times that some began to wonder if there was truth in it. She would smile and shake her head, adding, "I don't want to hurt Amara, but sometimes I feel Taye looks at me differently." These words, spoken with false innocence, slowly planted suspicion in the minds of others. It didn't stop there. Lindiwe carefully crafted moments that made it seem like she and Taye shared a special bond. Whenever they were in the same room, she would position herself near him, offering to help carry things or asking for his opinion on matters she could have easily handled alone. She laughed at his smallest jokes, held his gaze longer than necessary, and often leaned in closer than Amara noticed. To onlookers, it could almost appear as if they were naturally more in sync, as if Lindiwe understood him in ways Amara did not. That was exactly what Lindiwe wanted people to think, that she was the one who truly matched his energy, his dreams, his presence. In her mind, Lindiwe began to create a future that wasn't her. She imagined herself walking by Taye's side, introducing him as her own. She pictured the whispers of neighbors turning into nods of approval when they saw them together. And most of all, she dreamed of the ring, Amara's ring, that would one day sit on her finger. The thought of it burned in her chest, making her both restless and determined. But Lindiwe was careful not to act too boldly. She knew Amara trusted her deeply, and she used that trust as her shield. Every kind gesture she made toward Taye, every extra hour she spent helping him, was hidden behind the excuse of doing it for Amara's happiness. And Amara, blind with faith in their friendship, never questioned her motives. The irony was cruel. While Amara spoke of her love for Taye with shining eyes, Lindiwe listened with a smile that hid her envy. She was not celebrating her friend's joy. She was studying it, figuring out how to steal it. In her heart, she convinced herself that she deserved Taye more than Amara did, that she would be a better partner. It was this belief that fueled her secret plan, a plan that no one could yet see. The stage was quietly being set. To everyone else, it looked like friendship and support. To Amara, it looked like loyalty. But to Lindiwe, it was the slow, careful path toward a dream that belonged to someone else. The news came quietly, but carried a weight that could change everything. Taye had gone to Amara's parents with a heart full of love and respect. He told them that he wanted to marry their daughter, that she was the woman who made his life complete. Amara's parents were overjoyed. They had always admired Taye's discipline, his humility, and the way he treated their daughter with kindness. When he explained that he wanted to propose at the upcoming family dinner, their faces lit up. It was the perfect occasion, surrounded by those who mattered most, a night that would be remembered forever. But someone else heard those words when she shouldn't have. Lindiwe, who had lingered nearby, caught every detail. The moment Taye left, her heart pounded with a mix of anger and desperation. This was the chance she had been waiting for, but it wasn't meant for her. Still, in her jealous mind, she believed she could turn the moment in her favor. If Taye was planning to propose, then maybe, just maybe, she could make him hesitate. Maybe she could plant herself so firmly in his presence that, even in front of everyone, he would falter. On the evening of the dinner, Amara dressed simply yet beautifully, her heart fluttering without knowing why. Taye had kept the proposal a surprise from her, but she felt a strange nervousness in the air. Meanwhile, Lindiwe arrived wearing her most stunning outfit, a dress that shimmered softly under the light, chosen to outshine everyone else in the room. Her makeup was flawless, her smile calculated. She looked less like a guest and more like a woman prepared for the spotlight. When the family gathered, laughter filled the room, but under it all was a quiet tension. Amara felt it without understanding it, while Lindiwe thrived on it. She made sure to sit close to Taye, brushing lightly against him as if by accident, laughing too loudly at his words, and catching his eyes whenever she could. Some relatives noticed and exchanged quick, uneasy glances, but Amara, blinded by trust, forced herself to ignore the strange energy between her best friend and the man she loved. Lindiwe's heart raced with confidence. In her mind, this was her moment. She believed that when Taye stood up with that little box in his hand, something would shift. Maybe he would look at her differently. Maybe in front of everyone, he would realize that she was the one he truly wanted. The fantasy played over and over in her head like a sweet song. She sat tall, her smile never wavering, ready for her victory. But deep within, the truth was already set. Taye's love had never wavered, not even once. The ring in his pocket carried only one name, and it wasn't Lindiwe. Yet, as the food was served and the family laughter grew louder, Lindiwe's plan wrapped itself tighter around her heart. She was certain that the night would end with her triumph, unaware that the very moment she longed for would be the one that shattered her. The dinner began like any other family gathering, with warm greetings, shared laughter, and the rich aroma of food filling the air. Amara's parents moved around proudly, making sure their guests were comfortable. Cousins chatted, uncles teased, and the younger children ran around the table before being hugged. But beneath all the joy, there was something heavier in the room, a tension that only a few could sense. Amara felt it most of all, though she couldn't explain why. Her heart was restless, her mind unsettled. She glanced at Taye, hoping to feel calm, but instead her eyes kept drifting to Lindiwe. Lindiwe was not behaving like a guest or even like a best friend. She was glowing in her seat, laughing too loudly at Taye's jokes, and leaning in closer than anyone thought proper. At one point, she touched his arm lightly, making it seem playful, but the gesture was enough to make an elderly aunt raise her eyebrows in disapproval. A cousin whispered to another, shaking her head at the shamelessness of it. The boldness of Lindiwe's actions shocked some relatives, but no one said anything. Out of respect for Amara and her parents, they chose silence, though their eyes spoke plenty. Amara's chest tightened each time she saw it. The way Lindiwe's hand lingered near Taye's, the way her smile sparkled as if she was the one being courted, it stung deeply. But Amara swallowed her feelings and forced a smile. She didn't want to ruin the evening or embarrass her parents. Confronting Lindiwe here, in front of everyone, felt unthinkable. She kept quiet, telling herself over and over that her best friend would never truly betray her. And yet, the unease pressed harder on her heart, making it hard to enjoy the meal set before. Taye, though polite, was not blind. He noticed the way Lindiwe hovered, the way her eyes lingered too long, and he felt the stares of the family watching. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Instead, he waited for the right moment, the moment he had been planning for weeks. His heart beat faster as he reached into his pocket, his fingers brushing against the small velvet box hidden there. The chatter around the table grew louder with laughter and clinking glasses, but suddenly, Taye pushed back his chair and stood. The sound of his chair scraping against the floor silenced the room. All eyes turned to him, and in that instant, time seemed to pause. Amara's breath caught in her throat, her eyes widening in confusion. Lindiwe's lips curled into a secret smile, her chest rising with excitement, as if this was the moment she had been waiting for. Then Taye pulled out the small box. Gasps echoed across the table. A hush fell over the room so heavy that even the children froze. The box in his hand glimmered under the soft light, carrying the weight of a promise. Amara's heart raced wildly. Lindiwe's fingers tightened around her napkin. Every soul at the table knew something life-changing was about to happen. For a moment, the room held its breath. Taye stood tall, the small box in his hand catching the eyes of everyone at the table. Lindiwe's heart swelled with confidence, her lips curving into a proud smile. She straightened her back, adjusted her dress, and tilted her chin slightly, as if preparing for her moment in the spotlight. In her mind, the scene was already written. Taye would call her name, he would open the box, and the room would explode in shock and admiration. She imagined herself standing, feigning surprise, while secretly savoring victory over the friend she had long envied. But then the unthinkable happened. Taye turned, his gaze steady and filled with love, and he walked past Lindiwe. The sound of his footsteps felt louder than the chatter that had filled the room moments ago. He stopped right in front of Amara. Without hesitation, he lowered himself onto one knee. Gasps erupted around the table. A cousin covered her mouth, an uncle let out a startled laugh, and Amara's parents looked at each other with tearful pride. Amara's eyes widened, her hands trembling as they rose to cover her lips. For a split second, she couldn't believe what she was seeing. The man she loved, the one she had dreamed of spending her life with, was right there on his knees, holding out a ring meant only for her. Lindiwe's confident smile shattered. Her body stiffened, and her face turned pale, drained of the color that moments earlier had been bright with expectation. She sat frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe. Her hand tightened around her napkin until it crumpled in her grip, but she could not speak. Everyone saw her silence. Everyone saw the truth she had tried so hard to hide. Taye's voice filled the room, steady and sincere. "Amara," he said, looking only at her. "From the moment I met you, I knew my life would never be the same. You are my peace, my strength, and my joy. I want nothing more than to walk every day of my life by your side. Will you marry me?" Tears blurred Amara's vision. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. She had imagined love, but never this depth of devotion, never this kind of courage. With a trembling voice she whispered, "Yes, yes, I will." The room erupted in cheers, claps, and joyful laughter. Her parents embraced each other, children squealed with excitement, and relatives reached for their phones to capture the moment. But in the corner of it all sat Lindiwe, pale and silent, her eyes darting between the happy couple and the relatives whispering behind their hands. She had thought this night would crown her with triumph, but instead, it unmasked her betrayal. Her silence spoke louder than words, and everyone who looked at her saw the envy that had poisoned her heart. The dream she had built for herself crumbled in that single moment, leaving her with nothing but shame. The celebration around the table was loud with joy, but beneath it ran a quiet current of whispers. Relatives leaned toward each other, their voices hushed but sharp. They had all seen the way Lindiwe had carried herself throughout the evening, her shameless closeness to Taye, her bold laughter, her expectant smile when he stood with the ring. Now, with the truth shining so clearly before them, they could not ignore it. An aunt muttered, "Did you see her face? She thought it was for her." Another shook his head in disbelief. How could she do that to Amara, after all these years? The murmurs spread like wildfire, every glance directed at Lindiwe heavy with judgment. Amara had tried to stay silent, but the weight of it pressed too hard on her heart. She had swallowed her unease for weeks, telling herself that her best friend could never betray her. But tonight, the mask had fallen. With the ring now on her finger and the love of her life kneeling by her side, she found the courage she had been holding back. She turned to Lindiwe, her voice trembling at first but growing steadier with each word. "Was my love not enough for you?" she asked, her eyes shining with hurt. "That you had to try and steal it?" The room fell silent again. The clinking of glasses stopped, the laughter died, and all eyes turned to Lindiwe. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came out. She stammered, her voice catching in her throat, but nothing she said could erase the truth that was already clear to everyone in the room. Her silence became her confession. The shame in her eyes told the whole story, her envy, her plotting, her failure. Amara's voice softened, but it cut even deeper. I gave you my trust, Lindiwe. I called you my sister, and this is what you chose to do with it. Lindiwe's chest rose and fell quickly, her hands twisting in her lap. She wanted to defend herself, to say it had all been a misunderstanding, but the memory of her own actions betrayed her. She had leaned too close, spoken too carelessly, dreamed too boldly. There was nothing left to say. Taye then rose from his knee and stood beside Amara, his hand resting firmly in her. His voice was steady, filled with quiet strength. Let it be known to everyone here, he said, looking directly at Lindiwe, that my love has never been for anyone but Amara. No one could change that, no whisper, no distraction, no scheme. Amara is the woman I chose, and the woman I will always choose. His words rang through the room like a bell, silencing every last whisper. Relatives nodded in agreement, some even clapping softly in support. Amara's parents beamed with pride, their trust in Taye confirmed. And Lindiwe, once glowing with false confidence, now sat small and broken under the weight of truth. Her dream had turned to ashes, and the betrayal she thought was hidden had been laid bare for all to see. The moment the confrontation ended, the air in the room felt heavy. No one could look at Lindiwe without remembering the shamelessness of her behavior. Her cheeks burned red, her eyes wet with tears she refused to let fall. She pushed her chair back suddenly, the sound screeching across the floor. Without a word, she stood and stormed out of the house, her heels clicking angrily against the tiles. The slam of the door behind her left an echo that seemed to hang in the silence for far too long. The relatives exchanged glances, some shaking their heads, others whispering again. She embarrassed herself, one cousin muttered. To think she could betray Amara like that, another added. The judgment was swift and unforgiving. They all knew Kisola was a small community, and word of this night would spread faster than fire. People would forget the beauty of Lindiwe's dress, her carefully painted smile, and even her charm. What they would remember, and what they would repeat, was her betrayal, the way she tried to steal her best friend's joy and failed. Outside, Lindiwe's tears finally fell as she walked away from the house, her pride in pieces. She had dreamed of being admired, of being the one everyone celebrated. Instead, she had become the subject of disgrace. She knew that by the next morning, neighbors would whisper when she passed, children would point, and families would use her story as a warning. No matter how pretty she looked, no matter how graceful she tried to act, people would see only the envy that had poisoned her heart. Inside the house, Amara sat quietly, her hands still trembling slightly even as Taye held them. Her heart was torn in two. On one hand, she felt a crushing heartbreak. This was Lindiwe, her childhood companion, the girl who had walked barefoot beside her to school, who had shared food and secrets with her. The thought that this same friend had plotted against her was like a wound deep in her chest. On the other hand, she felt an undeniable relief. The truth had finally come out. The lies, the pretending, the doubts Lindiwe had planted. None of it could survive under the light of what had just happened. The ring on her finger wasn't only a promise of love. It was proof that betrayal could not destroy what was real. Her parents embraced her, whispering comfort, while relatives praised her strength. You handled yourself with grace, one aunt said softly. Taye stood close, steady as a rock, assuring her with every glance that his love was unshaken. Yet even with all the love around her, Amara's heart ached for the loss of the friendship she once cherished. As the night went on, the dinner slowly returned to celebration, though the shadow of what had happened lingered. For Amara, it was the beginning of a new chapter, one where she carried both the pain of betrayal and the peace of knowing that truth had prevailed. The days after the dinner were heavy for Amara. Even with the ring on her finger and the joy of knowing Taye's love was hers, she could not shake the ache in her heart. At night, when the house grew quiet, memories of Lindiwe would rush back. Laughter under mango trees, whispered secrets in the dark, promises of forever friendship. It was almost impossible to understand how someone she had trusted like a sister could turn into the one who tried to wound her deepest. Forgiving felt like climbing a mountain with no end. Each step forward was followed by another wave of pain. But Amara also knew she could not stay in bitterness forever. As much as her heart hurt, she began to realize that betrayal often comes not from strangers, but from those closest to us. It was a hard truth to accept, but in some way, it made her stronger. She told herself that what Lindiwe did spoke more about Lindiwe's heart than her own work. Envy had been Lindiwe's chain, not. Amara had lost a friend, but she had not lost herself. Slowly, she began to rebuild her peace, even if forgiveness was not yet complete. Through it all, Taye stood by her side. He never grew tired of her questions, never brushed away her pain with empty words. Instead, he listened. When she cried, he held her. When she doubted, he reminded her gently of the truth. "My heart has always been yours," he would say, steady and sure. He didn't rush her healing, he walked through it with her. That patience became proof of his loyalty, stronger than any speech he could have made. There were days when Amara felt weak, questioning if she could ever trust fully again. On those days, Taye would remind her of the simple things, the way he showed up, the way he kept his word, the way his love had not once wavered. Each small action became a stone laid on the path of their future, building something solid that betrayal could not break. Little by little, Amara began to smile again, not just for others, but from her heart. She learned that healing was not forgetting, but choosing to move forward without carrying bitterness. The scar of Lindiwe's betrayal would remain, but it would no longer define her. Instead, it became a lesson, one that taught her the value of discernment, the strength of resilience, and the gift of true love that cannot be stolen. In time, her bond with Taye grew even deeper. They had walked through fire together, and instead of being burned, they had been refined. Their laughter returned, their plans for the future brightened, and their love carried a weight of tested truth. What had begun as heartbreak slowly transformed into a testimony that love, when loyal and patient, can turn even the sharpest pain into strength. As Amara looked at the ring on her finger, she realized it was more than gold and stone. It was not just jewelry to show the world she was engaged. To her, it had become a symbol of something much deeper: loyalty, trust, and destiny. Every time the light caught it, she remembered not only the love Taye had declared, but also the trial that had tested them both. She often thought back to that night at the dinner table, and in her memory, one image always stood out: Lindiwe's frozen face. It was a picture she could never forget, the moment envy turned to shame. That look became a silent reminder that jealousy is a fire that burns only the one who carries it. No matter how carefully Lindiwe had plotted, her envy had destroyed her own happiness, not Amara's. When the day of her wedding finally came, Amara walked down the aisle with joy that was not naive but tested. She married Taye not only because she loved him, but because they had faced storms together and come out stronger. Their bond was real, proven, and unshaken. She wore her ring proudly, not as a prize won, but as a story written with truth and faithfulness. The lesson stayed with her and with everyone who had witnessed the drama. True love cannot be stolen. What is built on loyalty cannot be shaken by envy. And betrayal, no matter how carefully hidden, always exposes itself in the end. For Amara, the ring was not just the beginning of a marriage. It was a lifelong reminder that love rooted in trust will always stand, even against the sharpest betrayal.